Before anyone speaks, every hierarchy already knows who will dominate, and it's almost never the most qualified person. You were taught that hierarchies reward talent, discipline, and loyalty, that the smartest rise, the hardest workers get noticed, and leadership eventually finds the most capable person. But watch any company, government, social circle, or online empire long enough, and the pattern breaks.
Promotions go to the politically untouchable. Influence gathers around the emotionally unreadable. And the people everyone privately fears rarely lose their position. This isn't corruption. It's a structural law most systems quietly obey. Hierarchies don't primarily select for competence. They stabilize around whoever becomes too costly to challenge. Once someone is perceived as dangerous to remove, the system begins protecting them automatically. Loyalty reorganizes, narratives shift, and even critics start adjusting their behavior. The moment you see this mechanism, every workplace decision, leadership change, and sudden rise to power stops looking random and starts looking engineered. To understand why hierarchies behave this way, you have to start with a simple psychological constant. Most human systems are not built to reward excellence. They are built to avoid instability. Competence helps a system function, but perceived threat determines how people position themselves inside it. The brain constantly scans for two signals: who can help me and who can hurt me. In theory, the first should matter more.
In practice, the second almost always wins. When someone is merely skilled, others cooperate with them when necessary. But when someone is perceived as socially, politically, or strategically dangerous to oppose, behavior changes at a deeper level. Conversations become cautious. Disagreements soften. Information starts flowing toward that person instead of around them. Not because everyone admires them, because removing them feels risky. Once that perception forms, the hierarchy begins quietly reinforcing their position. You can see this in workplaces where the most productive employee stays stuck while the politically insulated one keeps advancing. You see it in social groups where the emotionally unpredictable member somehow sets the tone. You see it online when certain figures become effectively uncancelable while others disappear after a single mistake. The pattern looks different on the surface, but the mechanism underneath is identical. Hierarchies don't only measure what you contribute, they measure the potential cost of crossing you. And once the perceived cost passes a certain threshold, the system stops evaluating you normally at all. Most people sense this dynamic early. Very few ever learn to name it. Here's the part most people get wrong. They assume this law only protects aggressive, openly dominant personalities. The loud executive, the ruthless politician, the socially intimidating alpha. But in real hierarchies, the individuals who become hardest to remove are often not the most visibly powerful. They're the most structurally embedded. Real insulation doesn't come from shouting. It comes from becoming inconvenient to replace. The quiet analyst who controls a workflow nobody else fully understands. The manager who quietly holds relationships across multiple departments. The longtime member who knows where every informal agreement, past conflict, and hidden dependency lives. These people don't always look dominant. Sometimes they even look replaceable, until someone actually considers removing them, and suddenly the invisible costs appear. Projects stall. Information gaps surface. Alliances get nervous. Leadership hesitates. What looked like a simple personnel change starts feeling like pulling a structural beam out of a building. This is the shift. Hierarchy doesn't stabilize around who looks strongest. It stabilizes around who creates the largest disruption if they vanish. And once a system subconsciously registers that disruption risk, perception rewrites itself.
Ordinary behavior starts being interpreted as authority. Neutral decisions feel strategic. Even flaws get reframed as necessary. Not because the person changed, because the hierarchy quietly decided it's safer if they stay exactly where they are. From that moment forward, upward movement stops being about proving value and starts being about proving removal would be dangerous. Most people never notice this, but hierarchies constantly run silent experiments. Who can be ignored? Who causes panic if removed? Who shifts the system without anyone realizing? The moment you spot these invisible calculations, every promotion, every influence grab, every sudden rise or fall stops being random and starts looking terrifyingly deliberate. To see how this law operates at scale, look at power through the lens of relational influence rather than formal authority. Hierarchies are not built solely on titles or output. They are networks of leverage. Every person holds nodes of control, information, relationships, or subtle social debts. The stronger the network of invisible levers someone possesses, the harder it becomes for the system to dislodge them, regardless of merit. Consider a corporate example. The CEO may set vision, but middle managers often hold the keys to operational continuity. The most politically savvy manager knows who handles crucial clients, who controls the data flow, and which teams depend on them for approvals. Even if the CEO notices inefficiency, removing this manager risks stalling projects, losing revenue, or triggering silent resistance. The hierarchy bends to protect that individual. Productivity alone rarely explains this. Structural indispensability does. In social or digital networks, the same rule applies. Influencers or thought leaders rise not just because of charisma, but because they occupy gaps others cannot fill. Removing them would create informational voids or social friction that the community instinctively avoids. That's why certain personalities seem untouchable, even when they act irrationally or destructively. Historical leaders demonstrate this too. Machiavelli documented similar patterns in Renaissance courts. Ministers or generals whose competence alone didn't secure their position. It was the combination of connections, hidden knowledge, and perceived cost of removal. Those perceived as too costly to replace became effectively permanent fixtures of power. The takeaway: influence flows through perception and dependency, not merit. Hierarchies survive by minimizing internal disruption. Individuals who understand this, or who accidentally fall into this role, manipulate outcomes invisibly. Even passive actors can gain disproportionate control simply by being strategically irreplaceable. And from a psychological standpoint, the majority of people never consciously see these dynamics, which is why hierarchies often seem arbitrary, yet operate with ruthless precision beneath the surface. Once you internalize this, every random rise, sudden fall, or untouchable leader starts to reveal a pattern, and the world suddenly looks much more calculated, cold, and unforgiving than anyone admits. The law governing hierarchies is deceptively simple, but its mechanisms run deep, layered in subtle psychological patterns most people never recognize. At its core, it operates on perceived cost versus benefit. Every human system, from corporate offices to social groups, unconsciously asks, if this person leaves or is removed, what will we lose or risk? The answer rarely has to do with skill alone. Instead, it's about disruption potential, the invisible liabilities or dependencies a person carries. Take attention and information control. Humans instinctively defer to those who hold knowledge that affects their outcomes. A manager who knows hidden loopholes in workflow, a social member who understands unspoken group rules, a digital influencer who controls channels others rely on, all acquire authority disproportionate to visible achievements. The hierarchy begins bending around them because removing them introduces friction that the system avoids at all costs. Then there's emotional predictability and manipulation.
People who are unreadable or subtly intimidating are difficult to challenge. Their moods, reactions, and decisions create uncertainty, which increases the perceived cost of confrontation. Most colleagues overestimate risk. They start aligning with the individual's actions rather than opposing them, giving the person quiet influence.
These are micro-behaviors, small adjustments in speech, eye contact, and timing that ripple across entire networks without anyone fully noticing. Dependency networks amplify this effect. Every human system is interdependent. Projects rely on people. Social cohesion relies on bonds. Communication relies on pathways. Individuals who occupy key nodes in these networks become structurally irreplaceable.
Removing them forces the network to reorganize, which is painful and risky. Even those with formal authority defer to them. The hierarchy protects them automatically, as if obeying a silent law. Historical parallels confirm this. Niccolo Machiavelli observed that rulers maintained power not by punishing all threats, but by letting certain actors become too dangerous to remove. He called it the art of structural leverage. Allows someone to accumulate influence, and the system bends around them, ensuring stability while discouraging direct opposition. The psychological takeaway is stark. Hierarchies reward neither talent nor morality. They reward disruptive indispensability. Recognizing these patterns changes how you interpret human behavior. What looks like favoritism, incompetence, or randomness is often a precise response to invisible pressures. A cold, efficient mechanism ensuring the system survives intact, no matter who occupies the top seats. Once this pattern is clear, every interaction, every promotion, and every apparent accident becomes intelligible and unnervingly predictable. Take a moment to step back and simply watch the system in motion. Notice how people move around one another, how small gestures ripple into larger patterns. Some voices dominate meetings without speaking loudly. Some decisions carry weight simply because of who is present, not what is said. Observe the social cues: who defers, who interrupts, who hesitates before challenging an idea. In digital spaces, notice how certain accounts guide conversations effortlessly, while others vanish into obscurity after minor missteps. These dynamics aren't about malice or genius. They're the natural rhythm of human networks, quietly sorting, prioritizing, and stabilizing themselves. Just watch. Almost all of it happens without anyone consciously realizing. By now, it should be clear. Hierarchies do not reward fairness, talent, or morality. They reward structural indispensability, the quiet leverage that makes removal costly, the unseen dependencies that bend systems around certain individuals. Once you recognize this, the world stops feeling random. Every sudden rise, every untouchable figure, every unearned promotion begins to reveal a hidden logic. This insight isn't just theoretical. It forces a choice: remain an observer, passively shaped by forces you barely understand, or begin operating with awareness of the underlying system. Self-awareness becomes a form of power. You can start mapping your own dependencies, understanding which nodes in your networks carry invisible weight, and identifying how others silently wield influence. Leadership isn't just about charisma or knowledge. It's about perceived cost and structural relevance. The people who dominate environments are often not the loudest, smartest, or hardest working. They are those who others subconsciously decide it's safer to keep in place. Once you grasp this, you stop playing by conventional rules. You begin to see opportunity in the gaps others overlook.
leverage in the connections others underestimate, and safety in the alignments others ignore. Most importantly, this understanding comes with responsibility. It does not excuse manipulation or cruelty, but it allows you to navigate hierarchies consciously, protect yourself from invisible forces, and make deliberate choices about where and how to assert influence.
The cold truth is simple. The system is indifferent to fairness. Survival, influence, and leadership flow through structural leverage and perception, not merit. Recognizing that law changes the way you approach relationships, decisions, and ambitions. Once internalized, you can step out of the random chaos most people accept and finally see the hierarchy for what it truly is. Pause and watch the patterns unfold without judgment. Notice who others defer to, who gathers information quietly, and who seems to move through the network unnoticed yet indispensable. Observe the subtle shifts in attention, tone, and timing, how influence flows in ways that are invisible until you look closely. Even in digital spaces, the same rules apply. Some accounts quietly guide conversations, while others disappear after minor errors. Take note of your own position. Which nodes in your network carry weight? Which dependencies make you visible or indispensable? Simply seeing these dynamics changes how you move within them. Hierarchies are not accidental. Every rise, every fall, every untouchable figure is part of a quiet calculation you rarely see, until now. Power flows not to the brightest or hardest working, but to those who become too costly to remove. Once you understand this, every workplace, social group, and online network begins to reveal the same ruthless pattern. The unsettling truth is that most people will never notice it. They will continue to follow rules that don't exist, applaud merit that never mattered, and wonder why the same personalities always end up at the top. But you don't have to be one of them. Awareness changes everything. You can start mapping influence, identifying invisible leverage, and protecting yourself from forces that operate silently. Ask yourself, in your world, who is impossible to remove and why? Which decisions feel random only because you've been looking in the wrong place? And most importantly, how do you position yourself so that the hierarchy bends safely around you rather than against you? This is not about domination. It's about seeing the law beneath the surface, understanding the game others play unconsciously, and refusing to be an unwitting participant. Once you see it, nothing looks the same again. The question is no longer what happens, it's what you do with what you now know.